Alrighty guys, so on this controller we have now done the button stabilization. We got no more wiggle room on here, it's just pure up and down press. We've done Teflon taping the shell to give silky actuation to our L&R triggers. And our next quality of life upgrade is to correct what I call trigger lag or trigger delay. And this is just a physical mod. You're not going to do anything to the PCB board or have to tune a fob or anything like it. This is just a quality of life upgrade that's fixes a problem that's baked into GameCube controllers. So to describe the problem that's at hand, okay, in Smash Ultimate, which this mod is for, it is not for Melee, the Switch only registers the analog input. The click, and when it bottoms out, means nothing. It is just not even programmed in. This is not a thing in Smash Ultimate. It only registers when you actually depress this a little bit. It's either on or off. There's no middle pull, no light pull. It's either on or off. And now how do we make that so that it's a more reliable actuation? There's two problems to confront here. Problem number one is the fact that the L&R triggers don't quite mount perfectly into the shell, which allows for a bit of rotation. If you can see this from top, I'm rotating the actual piece inside the shell. It's going to the side, it's not depressing. The second problem we're going to solve is we're going to eliminate a full press. So we're going to make it so that this trigger bottoms out about halfway through a pull, so that you can just tap it and it'll bounce right back. This mod is going to be indestructible too. It's so easy, it's so simple, you won't believe what you've ever done before. So let's break this thing open and we'll talk about it. The things we need for this build are going to be a good micro screwdriver. You can use manual ones, but I've got a bit of arthritis, so I'm all about my little electric guy here. And nitrile O-rings. Now I'll leave the description for the ones I've got here in the description to show which ones to use, but there's actually a lot of wiggle room for getting these. As long as they have that right interior diameter, then you're pretty much golden. And these are so cheap. This whole pack was like $6 free shipping. And how many controllers am I going to do with that? Because it usually takes only 2 rings per controller. That, and to eliminate the actual rotation of it, we're going to use Teflon tape. Alright, so first things first, get your screwdriver going. Grab your tri-wing. And zip out the back 6 screws. All the screws are out. Pull the back case off. And this is where we're going to be doing our work, so we'll just set this aside for now. It is unnecessary and pretty much done. Okay, now I'm going to demonstrate what I'm talking about when I'm speaking about trigger delay. And in fact that it's rotating in the housing. Right here, this little square hole, we're going to zoom in here, is what actuates the analog slider. I've got one right here in my tweezers showing that it's got a little post and it slides up and down. If you've ever been a GameCube controller, you know what this looks like. And when it's all hooked up, this would actually be upside down, but hard to film. When it rotates in the housing, it's not actually depressing that until it rotates a bit, then starts sliding. What we're aiming for is no rotation, immediate sliding. And to show it right in here, if you look at where this square hole is, because that's the only important part of this whole trigger, it rotates in the housing a hair before it starts actuating the trigger. We are going to eliminate that little bit of rotating. And Lord, if you've got third-party triggers, this is amplified times 10. And this mod will work for those as well. OEM ones are a little tighter, but the Chinesium good old plastic triggers that everyone likes to mod with for bright colors, me included. This solves a big problem of why those triggers are so crappy. Alright, so let's show how we do this. Let's get these 4 screws, here, 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 and here, that are holding in our triggers. Alright, so these screws are out, which allows us to see our little trigger assembly here, and we'll demonstrate the rotation one more time. We'll zoom in. It just has a little wiggle room in the housing. You can very much notice it right here where there's a little stop built into the trigger to stop it against the shell. And you can see it's got a few millimeters of movement, which doesn't do anything over here before the trigger actually locks in and starts depressing. And if you're going for that hair trigger feel, that just completely ruins it. Alright, so let's go ahead and pull this out. It's as easy as pinching it from the front and back and tilting it up. So allow you to move the spring and remove the trigger quite easily. Now, if you have it at this point, this is a great time to Teflon tape the housing for the triggers. As you see in here, it's already done on mine. Piece there, piece on the side, piece on the top. And that just makes it so that the plastic is not grinding against plastic and is sliding much nicer against that Teflon tape that you've added. Makes for better controller feel, much more premium than your standard controller. While we're at this stage as well, now it is time to go ahead and add our little O-ring guys. This is just so easy to do. We're going to take out 2 O-rings. And that's it. That's all you're going to need to modify one controller. You're going to take your O-ring, put it on this post right here, just press it a little bit, take your tweezers, and slide it down. That's it. That's it. That's the mod. In demonstration, when you are mounted on the controller, it will now bottom out against this top of this housing here, against the actual O-ring. All right, we'll set that one down. Same for the other side. Take our O-ring and press it on. Take our tweezers and press it in. There you go, it's done. That is it. First, we need a little strip of Teflon tape. Does not take much. I'm talking 2 millimeters. And we're going to take that 2 millimeter strip, and we're even going to shorten that to about half of what the width of the tape is. And that's it. This little guy right here is all it's going to take. All right, and now time to fight it. We got to get it to at least stick on there a little bit. We're going to take it, and of course this is very wiggly and hard to film. Sorry, my hand's going to be in the way, but it takes every bit of finger to get it in there. You want it to mount onto the inside of the trigger towards the center of the shell. That's where we're going to want it to prevent that rotation. We're adding thickness on basically one side of it. Do you see the placement right here? And again, it does not want to adhere at all because of how burnished this plastic is. It's so shiny, it's so slick. You can take a Dremel and rough it up, but in my experience, if you don't perfectly place it after you rough it up, then you're going to get some grinding on the plastic. But honestly, you're just going to have to wiggle and mess with it until you get it to stick a little bit. Right there, it's sticking a little bit, and that's what's important. Now, once it's stuck on there a little bit, we're just going to cheat. We're going to take the actual plunger receiver here, put it on at an angle, and just squish that sucker on there. Give it a good spin, and that's going to force the adhesive to stick on there. It's going to be rough at first, but the more you squish it, the more flush it will be, and it'll just give that tiny little millimeter of extra space that is required to keep it from rotating. Look, even just sitting on here without a spring, no longer does it really want to rotate. Of course, it's in my hand and the flesh is weak, the plastic is strong, but it has no more wanting to rotate. It still actuates, but we're gonna have to mush it a couple times to get it exactly where we want it to be. All right, got the correct amount in there. It's back together. We're gonna go ahead and place it back in its housing, because we don't want to let that plunger come off a few times and accidentally pull that Teflon tape off. Really, this mod, this is the hardest part. It's trying to get that Teflon tape to adhere to that burnished surface in such a small, tiny amount. And it is a struggle. It'll take you a few tries, but it's in there now. And look how shortened this trigger pull is. Let's zoom in a bit. And now look, remember over here where you would push the outside and it would boot? Now look at that. Nice and firm. When I actually depress it, it begins moving the immediate time that the whole shell begins moving. Got a little spring noise, but we can eliminate that by just rotating the spring a couple times and trying, and then rotating and trying. And eventually you will not have a clicky spring. It'll sit itself appropriately. After rotating it a couple times, the only real noise we get is when it returns to the outside of the shell. And that's okay. It's got a little bump stop here that's made out of plastic. You can put a little piece of foam tape right between there. Let me, something better to point. You put it right here on top of the actual trigger itself on that bump stop, and it'll make less noise when it's coming out. That's not really a concern. I like a good clacky controller. I want to hear everything I do. But we have a shortened pull, and now it does not rotate. Now, it's a tiny millimeter, but if you remember from earlier, it was like 4 millimeters. Now we're down to like half a mil. And that's how we get that hair trigger movement. We'll move on to the other side. I'm just going to knock that out real quick because it's such a wiggly little pain in the butt. And then we'll see how these operate. And there we go. Both triggers are in. Got their springs rotated so they don't make much noise. The trigger pulls are shortened now. We have eliminated the housing rotation on this side and this side. So if you push on the inside of the triggers, it's the exact same, or the outside of the triggers and the inside of the triggers have the exact same actuation. Now all that's left to do is to reinstall the caps on these guys. It's easy as sliding them on there and zipping them back in. Double check that these housings are on nice and firm by lifting up on it. If you've got any wiggle room, go back and tighten them even more. You want them nice and secure. Shorten trigger pulls, that's all they pull now. No rotation in the housing, or at least dramatically reduced rotation in the housing, which means these are going to feel outstanding. They're going to feel more like a button than a slider. And again, it still slides, I get it. It's not purely a digital trigger, but as much as I would love to be able to just install, some 3D printed trigger plugs, it just doesn't work for Ultimate since it only registers those analog sliders and not the actual full click depression. Alright, so it's back together. Check it out. Our triggers are actuating nicely. Our buttons are now nice and clicky and firm, will not move. Our sticks are lubricated and are seated and height adjusted appropriately. And this is now a beautiful feeling controller. Really competitive. You'll never have to think about it. Everything is clicky and actuates beautifully. And this is going to play very well. And this is, it's just, I like quality of life modifications. And this is just a few of the ones that I absolutely love. And I hope you will love it too.